All right, settle in. Because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story you only believe if you've lived through it yourself, or if you've spent a few decades dealing with suburban neighbors and those notorious HOA types. Picture this. It's a Tuesday afternoon. I'm standing on my own front porch, minding my business, probably thinking about whether I should deadhead the yellow roses or just let them be. The sun's doing its best to make the peace variety glow, and for a second, everything feels as peaceful as it looks. Then, out of nowhere, cold steel snaps around my wrists, and I find myself spun around like I'm a contestant on some weird police reality show. Except the audience is just my own confused face, reflecting in the front window. And the guy barking at me isn't Ryan Serhant. It's Officer Doug Jenkins, neighbor, and apparently judge, jury, and executioner all rolled into one. Now, here's the kicker. The person who set this all in motion, who's standing there on my porch with a face like she's chewing on a lemon rind, is none other than Janet Jenkins, our HOA president, my neighbor from across the street, and the living, breathing embodiment of every bad HOA Karen meme you've ever seen. My son David later dubbed her HOA Karen. And folks, she earned that title more than she ever earned her HOA badge. For context, I'm Arthur Williams, just art to my friends. I've lived on Sycamore Drive in Clearview, Ohio for going on 35 years, raised my son here, buried my beloved wife Sarah from this house, painted these walls more times than I can count. I'm retired now, taught high school history back in the day, and all I want is my peace and my roses. At least, that's what I used to want. Then Janet Jenkins and her husband Doug moved in across the street and decided to make me their personal HOA project. Janet, with her teal blazer that fits about as well as her personality fits into this neighborhood, made it her mission to improve Sycamore Drive, starting with me. It began the usual way. Notes about the grass being a touch too high, complaints about my granddaughter's wind chimes, lectures about the color of my trim not harmonizing with her vision of suburban perfection. Always tried to take it in stride. My late wife said I was patient as a saint, stubborn as a mule. She was right. I can tolerate a lot, but push me far enough, and that mule's gonna kick. You know what I mean? This Tuesday, though, Janet decided the time for notes was over. I'd been out back, wrestling with crabgrass, when I heard a racket out front. Came around the corner, sweat stinging my eyes. And there's Janet, not ringing the doorbell, not knocking, but full on trying to jimmy my front door open with a hammer. Official HOA inspection, she calls it, swinging that hammer like she's about to star in her own HGTV demo day. I tried to keep my voice calm. Janet, you lose your key? Maybe a little sarcasm. But what can I say? Old habits die hard. She whirls around, shrieking, I'm authorized. My master key isn't working. Your door is non-compliant. Master key? I told her, Janet, this is Clearview, Ohio, not Buckingham Palace. Her face went all shades of red and purple, and before I knew it, she's waving the hammer and shouting about rights and authority. And I'm telling her she's got about 2 seconds to put down the hammer before I call the cops. She beats me to it, though. Dialing up Doug, Officer Jenkins, who shows up with a look on his face like I've just robbed the National Treasury. Next thing I know, I'm in handcuffs, on my own porch, neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains, little Timmy from across the street, staring wide-eyed, and Janet, standing there with a smirk that could curdle milk. She tells Doug I threatened her with my garden trowel, which, by the way, was still out by the crabgrass, not that it mattered. It was humiliating, no other word for it. That walk to the cruiser, Doug muttering about how people like me think we're above the rules, Janet pointing to the scratch on my door, and spinning her version of events like a spider on caffeine. It all felt unreal, like the universe had decided to prank me for every late library book I'd ever returned. But the worst part was knowing my son David might hear about this before I even got a chance to explain. He's a dispatcher for the county, handles real emergencies. And here's his dad, arrested for the crime of existing while retired. At the station, Doug put on a show, tossing around accusations of assault, resisting arrest, disturbing the peace. I kept my cool, explained what happened. But you could tell some folks there had seen this song and dance performance. They took my fingerprints, my photo, the whole works. I just kept asking, politely, what crime I was supposed to have committed. The desk sergeant Henderson just sighed, typed, and gave me that look that says, "Don't worry, this too shall pass." Here's the twist. While I'm sitting in the holding area, my son David's already piecing it all together. He's listening in on the radio, hears Doug calling for backup on Sycamore Drive, recognizes my name, and his professional calm gives way to outright disbelief. David's smart. He checks the logs, makes some quiet inquiries, and starts building a timeline in his head. By the time Detective Miller comes to talk to me, she's already spoken to David and to Janet. The evidence doesn't add up. Scratch marks on the door show forced entry from the outside. My story checks out, and Janet's account is full of holes. Detective Miller tells me, "We're not pressing any charges, Mr. Williams. This smells like a neighborhood dispute gone wild." Relief, sure, but also a boiling anger. This was malicious, an abuse of power, plain and simple. David was waiting for me in the lobby, furious, worried, protective. We got home, Janet's curtains twitching across the street, and David said, "We're not letting this go, Dad." He helped me file a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. Then with the city for unlawful arrest and harassment. He's not just a dispatcher, he's got a knack for details and paperwork, and he made sure every angle was covered. Janet's forced entry with a hammer, her "you people" comment, Doug's escalation, the false accusations. We weren't out for blood, just for accountability. But you know, Sycamore Drive isn't just Janet, Doug, and me. Once we started talking to the neighbors, Mrs. Norma with her riot of flowers, Mr. Henderson with his perpetually late basketball hoop, the Changs, the Parkers, we realized Janet's reign of pettiness had left a trail of grievances, all up and down the block. Little things, fines for barking dings, letters about holiday lights, threats over recycling bins. Folks had kept quiet, not wanting trouble with the HOA president whose husband was a cop. But my arrest was the spark. Mrs. Norma, who Janet once fined because her chihuahua barked at a squirrel, became our right-hand woman, gathering signatures, rallying the neighborhood. We called a special HOA meeting, gathered evidence, and by the time we were done, even the most timid residents had stories to tell. Janet tried to fight back, sent me a violation notice for the scratch she put on my door, cited my non-compliant roses, but it just made our case stronger. We complied with every rule, every ridiculous request. And when she complained about the roses, I dabbed the tips with beige paint, just to highlight the absurdity. When she tried to ban my granddaughter's wind chimes, I hung up 50 tiny chimes instead. So subtle that they drove her nuts without making a sound. The HOA meeting was something else. Janet, all dolled up in her teal blazer, Doug glowering in the back, in a room full of neighbors ready to be heard. David calmly laid out the evidence, vague financials, invented rules, sworn statements from half the street. Mr. Abernathy, a retired accountant, called out Janet's financial summary for the joke it was. Residents, one by one, told their stories. The gnomes, the fines, the intimidation. It was like years of frustration. Finally found a microphone. The vote was called, the ballots tallied, and Janet was out, removed from every position she held. Her husband slumped low in his chair, powerless to stop it. After that, things changed fast. The new interim committee was sensible, transparent. Doug, after his internal affairs slap on the wrist, got retraining, a reprimand, the whole 9 yards. Suddenly, he became a whole lot less visible around Sycamore Drive. The body cam footage of my arrest showed everything, clear as day. and David made sure the city manager had a copy, just for the record. Other folks came forward with their own stories, and I suspect Doug's reputation took a hit he won't soon recover from. Janet withdrew, her once pristine lawn, now just a little less perfect. The teal blazer, mostly retired. She kept to herself, and I think even she realized her days as HOA queen were over. But David and I decided we needed one final act, a reminder, a little bit of poetic justice. At our annual neighborhood barbecue, after a summer of peace and restored neighborliness, we presented Janet with a 3-foot-long golden master key, bedazzled, ridiculous, engraved with her name, and a warning to be used only in her wildest dreams. The whole block burst out laughing. Janet didn't say a word, just took the key and walked home, Doug trailing behind, the perfect, harmless coup. These days, Sycamore Drive is quiet. The roses are blooming, the wind chimes tinkle, and I can sit on my porch. Without fear of citation or scrutiny, the neighborhood found its voice, and we proved that even a stubborn old history teacher and his son could bring down a petty tyrant, not with anger, not with revenge, but with patience, persistence, and a little well-timed humor. So, what do you think? Ever had a neighbor like Janet or an HOA story of your own? Drop it in the comments, because sometimes the best way to deal with nonsense isn't a fight, but a little bit of community, a dash of stubbornness, and when needed, a giant glittering key. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's slow burning, clever, and best served with a side of laughter.